Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason Del Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We have reached the week of Thanksgiving, and for all you football fans out there, you know that is the region semifinals, third round of the playoffs. We still have a healthy number of teams left with some juicy matchups, and we will talk about how they got here. We will talk about what's in store. We'll try to decipher who's going to be able to get into December, play in the region final next week. We got a lot still to talk about here in this football season, which is great for Texoma. We got 5 teams still alive in the region semifinals. I feel like that's the largest number we've had in a while. Usually we have 2 or 3. Maybe you get a 4th team still alive. But we've got 5 teams still going out of the 13 in our coverage area. To be able to be in the top 16 in the bracket, that says a lot about the seasons that these teams have had. And we've talked about them all year because they've been good from day one. They had really good seasons last year, and for some even the year before that. So we kind of knew that this was possible, and so it's just really awesome to see what all these teams are doing and what they can do. And as we get into discussing this, there is the possibility that we have a couple all-local matchups lurking in the future. And if we could get both of those, even just one of those would be awesome. But if we could get both of them, man, would that be something for football in this area? The way the season's played out, I really hope it does happen. But we'll talk about that as we go game by game. Like we always do, we'll start from the top, go to the bottom. We only had one team lose, and they were the biggest team that was left playing last week. That was the Van Alstyne Panthers in their 4A Division II Region 2 matchup against Carthage. We talked about how this would be a tough matchup, and it was. Van Alstyne ends up losing 61-30 in a game where Carthage was up 54-0 in the third quarter before Van Alstyne got some stuff going, got some touchdowns, got some good endings for some of their senior guys, namely the trio in the backfield that has been doing everything they can to power Van Alstyne to the second round for the second straight year. Starting with Dakota Howard, 16 carries, 103 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Jaden Mahan, 24 carries, 128 yards, and a touchdown. And Jackson Allen, 6 carries, 31 yards, and a touchdown as well. So Carthage advanced. They're number 1. They're going to play number 2 Gilmer, who ended up beating Gainesville. So we didn't get the rematch. That was kind of highly unlikely because of the opponents. But again, another good season for the Panthers, getting to the second round. They had that initial struggle in 4A, missing the playoffs. But the last 2 years, they've gotten better in their district. They finished higher each of the last 2 years, and then they've won a playoff game in each of those seasons as well. So they're starting to really put that foothold in 4A to be a consistent playoff qualifier. They're gonna lose some key guys. Obviously, you have Dakota Howard, you have Jaden Mahan, you have Jackson. Those 3 are all seniors. You have guys on defense that are seniors that you're gonna have to replace. But again, they've done a good job of finding that footing in 4A, and that's a good thing going forward. Like I said, they might still end up being the second team in the district. So it's not out of the question that obviously they go for another playoff finish. And then the question is, when you look at the bracket, obviously now you kind of know, you have Carthage on one side, you have Gilmer on the other. You're gonna have to deal with one of them, and the question is, can you? And so that's obviously something to look forward to. But again, if you're consistently making the second round of the playoffs, that's a real good thing for your program. It shows consistency. It shows that you have talent. Getting to the second round is not easy. And so it's a good foundation as we've seen with Van Alstyne. They're growing, and so you want to get that winning talent in the pipeline. It's not going to come, in the next realignment, but there's, you have to start looking a couple of realignments from now. We could be talking about, Van Alstyne being in the 4A Division 1 bracket instead of Division 2. So that's the team that lost this week with Van Alstyne. We're sorry to see them go. Was hoping to get them to join the party here after Thanksgiving. But again, another good season for the Panthers. Finishing 7-5, getting to the second round of the playoffs. All right, and so we'll go down in the bracket to 3A Division 1, Region 1, where Whitesboro still getting the job done as they advance to the region semifinals for the second straight year. They are 10-1 after they won 65-15 against Dalhart, and they are playing Paradise. We have a District 4 3A matchup. We actually have 3 of the 4 teams from that. The top 3 teams in that district are the final 4 in the region, because the winner of this game will play the Brock Bushland winner. And I think everybody is assuming that will be Brock, although Bushland is a talented team. But Whitesboro was the region final last year, and there's a pretty good chance that happens again. But Paradise comes in. They are 10-2. They won 17-14 against Shallowater. We talked about last week. No matter what, Whitesboro was going to be playing some sort of a rematch here in the region semifinals, and it happens to be a team from their district. For those who don't remember, this is a matchup back in Week 10 that Whitesboro won 18-7, and for those who don't remember, Week 10 was the night of the rain and the cold and the wind, and everybody's games, for the most part, unless you were in 6-2A Division 1 and you moved your games to Thursday, everybody else tried to tough it out, assuming that the weather would pass, and it did not. And of course, the next week we had the threat of rain to end the season, and everybody wanted to moving their games to a Thursday. But so Whitesboro won the game 18-7. And so here we are in a rematch. I think we all assumed Whitesboro was going to be back at this part. Paradise is a little bit of a surprise, just from the standpoint of you're talking about a program that hasn't had this success, and on a couple levels. One, they had never won more than one playoff game in a season until winning last year. They've got their most wins in a season since 2008. So while they had been making the playoffs a couple of times in the recent seasons, they hadn't been able to string it together, and now they have. And so this is an interesting matchup, because here you have a Whitesboro team that is rolling. They put up 60 points in the first playoff game against Vernon, put up 65 points this last game against Dalhart, to win by 50. And it is the same cast of characters getting the job done. Over 500 yards of offense again, 285 on the ground, 248 through the air. Grayson Ledbetter, 6 carries, 111 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Max Parker, 6 carries for 84 yards and 3 touchdowns. Mac Harper, 15 of 18 passing, 248 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also ran for a score as part of 5 carries for 46 yards. You throw in what he did with the passing game. Main target in this game was Carter Sluter, 5 catches, 124 yards and a touchdown. Jay Sanders, 3 catches, 59 yards and a score as well. Clay Hermes had 4 catches for 38 yards. And this was a game that was over pretty quick. To give Dalhart some semblance of credit, they led 7-6 in the first quarter, but then of course you have a 9-1 team against a team with a losing record, or a team that won to get to a 5-5, ended with a losing record at 5-6, and so Whitesboro ends up going up 44-7 at halftime, and they extend that to what would that be, 58 to nothing after 3 quarters in their win. and they're a team that I think they've shown all year long they have an offense that's really good. They have a defense that's been really good. We talked about their only losses to Brock by the slimmest of margins at the goal line on the last play of the game. But you have a Paradise team that I think I don't know. I wonder if they feel like they have nothing to lose. Obviously, they're a good team. You're 10-2. All the teams we're going to talk about, you're in the final 16. You're a good team. Their only losses are to Brock and to Whitesboro. They played Brock almost as tough as Whitesboro did. They win last week against a good shallow water team to the point where it's a close game. They found a way to win that game. They survived a field goal attempt late to try to force overtime. And I wonder if they come into this knowing, they're the underdog. People are not expecting them to win. They're already having the greatest season they've had in a really long time. And you kind of wonder what they're going to do. And I talked with Coach Fagan about having to play a district opponent, at any point in the playoffs. Obviously they had to do it last year with Brock when they got to the region final. But it's weird because of the way the last game went that you can't take away a lot from that because Paradise had some injuries. The weather dictated a game plan that I don't think either team, especially Whitesboro, wanted to use. And honestly, that night was like that for everybody in this area. That because of the rain and the wind and the cold. So you can't really, if you pull up the film from that game, you can't. What you did that night is probably not going to be applicable to what we're going to see on Friday at 2:00 at Prosperous Children's Health Stadium. And so I wonder what this is actually going to look like, and I wonder if that changes Paradise's approach. I don't know if it changes Whitesboro's approach because the feeling around Whitesboro has the whole since they lost last season. We control, we do what we do, and you have seen that every game this year. It's just so consistent with what they want to do. On offense, they've continued to put up big numbers. They've beaten really good opponents along the way. They are inches away from being an undefeated team with a win over Brock. And so I don't know if it affects them differently than a Paradise team that hasn't been here. But it's two teams that know each other really well. I mean, obviously they've played in district, every year for the last couple of years. The games have been meaningful. They've meant, playoff seeding or making the playoffs, trying to get a tiebreaker over the other team. And obviously, like I said, the game that they played was close. Does that mean anything from a confidence standpoint for Paradise? We can sit here and say the coaches will look at that and go, well, we can't use this game plan. If we're Paradise, Whitesboro's not going to run the ball 55 times like they did that night. That's not their game plan. They want to be balanced. They have weapons in the passing game. But the weather said, hey, we got to run the ball, 90% of the time. And that's what they did to get a win. But if you're the Kids, do you look at it and say, hey, we only lost 18-7. We held Whitesboro to 18 points. We were within 12 points. It's a 2-score game, and they don't look at all the other factors. They just look at what their perception of it is, and I wonder if that has raised their confidence level as opposed to, oh, hey, we played them a month ago and they beat us 55-14. How are we going to make that up? And so it's definitely interesting to see what's going to happen, and it's also interesting to see Whitesboro is the hunted now. Last year it was this great ride. They didn't make the playoffs the year before. All of a sudden now you're beating all these people. you were the underdog. Nobody thought you were going to win your first round game. Nobody thought you were going to win your second round game. Nobody thought you were going to win the third round game. And then all of a sudden you're playing Brock, who, again, nobody thought you were going to beat because they'd already beaten you. So they spent all that last playoffs just on this great ride, having fun, playing loose because nobody expected them to be there. Now, here's the expectations for Whitesboro. Get back to the region final and play Brock. It's been what probably everybody's been predicting, since last year ended, going into this season. The way the season has played out week by week, I don't think anybody has changed on that opinion. You've gone out the first 2 weeks of the playoffs, and you've outscored your opponents 125 to 20, or 125 to 21. And so the expectations are there. And can you handle going into this matchup knowing that you've already beaten this team, that you can handle it? Don't be looking ahead to the fact that Brock is potentially waiting in the wings if you do advance. So it's going to be interesting to see. Rematches are always interesting for a variety of reasons. We'll talk about another one here in a little bit. That you sometimes you just never know. But obviously Whitesboro is the favorite. I think, like we said, I think a lot of people are expecting Whitesboro Brock to meet again next week. But again, I think Bushland's a team that is capable. They're another team out here in Region 1 that maybe we don't think about a whole lot for the most part because they are in Region 1. They are kind of far out there. There's not a lot of our teams that cross paths with them, but they are traditionally a Region 1 power. They're always usually at this point in the playoffs, if not further. So that obviously is something to pay attention to no matter who advances. Out of all four of these teams, I think you're looking at a really good matchup for next week. But in order to get there, Whitesboro's got to take care of business against Paradise. We'll see if they can do it again in this Division 3A Division 1 Region 1 semifinal, 2 p.m. on Friday at Prosper's Children's Health Stadium. Staying in 3A Division 1, over in Region 2, in that semifinal matchup, we have Pottsboro against Grandview. Pottsboro is 11-1 after they won last week 62-49 against Whitney. Grandview won 48-14 against Mineola. So they are 10-2. And this game is at 1 p.m. on Friday at Mesquite Memorial Stadium. So Pottsboro is going to go back to Mesquite Memorial next week. This is a rematch of a couple years ago. Obviously, all the kids are different this time around because unless there's a freshman or two or senior that was a freshman that contributed to those teams, because obviously that's 2019, 19, 21, 22. So the seniors were freshmen the last time this happened when they met in the 3A Division 1 state championship game. And Grandview won the second of their back-to-back titles, 42-35. That was a great game, a great Grandview team. Obviously, that's the best team Pottsboro has ever had. That was their first appearance in the championship game, and they came up just a little short. And this is the best season for both of these programs since that point, getting to the region semifinals for both of them. And obviously, the winner is going to continue that onto the region final, where they will play the winner of the West Malakoff game on the other side of the bracket. That is, I feel like both these matchups are 50-50-ish. They're all really good. They all have really good records. And I think it's safe to say you could see any combination of the four teams playing in the region final next week. Obviously, if it's Malakoff, that would be a rematch for Pottsboro. And I'm almost and I know West would be a rematch for Grandview. They actually played, and I feel like Malakoff could be his too. I think that is that's a rematch for Grandview. I'm gonna pull it up here while we're talking because obviously they would go into that with a little bit of knowledge of what they're getting into for the biggest game of the season. all things considered, with what Grandview's done. And obviously, if it's Pottsboro Malakoff, that's who's ended Pottsboro's season the last 2 years in the playoffs, in the second round. So that's obviously, that would be something to watch as well. I'm gonna pull up Grandview's schedule while we're talking. Yes, they played Malakoff and West. West is in Grandview's district. So they beat Malakoff in non-district 21-17, and they lost to West in district 38-21. And then, of course, since we're also talking about common opponents, both Pottsboro and Grandview have common opponents. Whitney is in Grandview's district, and of course, so Pottsboro won last week 62-49. Shootout like I thought it would be. And Grandview beat Whitney 41-7. And then, of course, last week we said that they beat Mineola to advance, and they beat Mineola 48-14. So if you're looking at it, you say, well, obviously, Grandview beat Whitney worse than Pottsboro did. But if you want to look at the Mineola matchup, that was a 48-19 game for a win by Pottsboro, and the Mineola game against Grandview was 48-14. So, which do you believe? Do you believe that the teams are pretty evenly matched, and that the 48-19 is more the 48-19, 48-14 is the better gauge compared to Whitney, or not? I don't know. So, but this is obviously this is another matchup where I think we could see a lot of points being scored. I did look it up because I wondered, because another big week, like we said, for Pottsboro, putting up 62 points. This is the second highest scoring offense in school history, behind the 2019 team. This team so far has scored 535 points, and that the team in 2019 scored 713. So there's a long way to go, and they're probably not going to get there, even if they did get that far, because that still is, 3 or 4 more games. You'd have to put up, 50 points a game the rest of the way in a full season. But it just shows how potent this offense has been. And again, they did it in this game, and I will point out that, Pottsboro was up 62-35 before Whitney scored twice in the fourth quarter, one with like a minute 10 left. So the score does look like, oh, hey, this was like a 2-score game. But it was they were basically up 28 points, early in the fourth quarter when Pottsboro scored its last touchdown. So the score may look a little closer than it was, but obviously, putting up 62 points, essentially in 3 quarters and a minute, shows how good Pottsboro continues to be on offense, and they did get a defensive touchdown in here that we'll talk about, but just the points that they put up all year, I think we said it last week or even the week before that, they really have not had a bad game when it comes to their offense, like where they we just had a stinker and put up 7 points or something like that. So in the win against Whitney, big games, like we said, on both sides of the ball, just because of just such balance. 229 yards rushing and 234 passing. Halen Flanagan with it was 12 of 21 for the 234 yards. Threw for 5 touchdowns. 3 of those went to Reed Thompson. Thompson finished 8 catches for 141 yards and the 3 touchdowns, one a 66-yarder. On the ground, who else? Major McBride, 22 carries for 169 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also caught a 44-yard touchdown on his lone catch. Jude Bentley's lone catch went for a 35-yard touchdown. Flanagan on the ground chipped in 17 carries for 60 yards. He didn't score. And then Cohen Rakita, 94-yard interception return for a touchdown, and that accounted for all of the points. And so it's what Pottsboro has done all year. Like I said, their only loss, is to Whitesboro, who obviously is still playing. So it's been another really good year for Pottsboro, and I wonder, I feel like this has a chance to be a shootout. Grandview's obviously put up a ton of points as well, and so it's just one of those games where I don't want to say it's who has the ball last. But these two, and I know it's not recent history, but the two times these teams have played, points get put up. So I'm leaning that way for this matchup. And again, it's you've got a team that is experienced. You can say this about both teams. I feel more for Pottsboro because the last 2 years, they kind of sort of dipped down in an overall record standpoint. They still made the playoffs, and they won in the playoffs, but the overall record was a lot worse than 11-1. So again, you have this group that has sort of built to this point. You have these upperclassmen, these juniors and seniors that are 2 and 3 year starters, and that maybe it's just all sort of clicked, which is and not to foreshadow anything, because we would love to see Pottsboro Whitesboro in the state semifinals, because if Pottsboro can win Region 2 and Whitesboro can win Region 1, they would play each other for a spot in the championship game. That would be amazing, and that would be awesome for this area to have that happen. And so I'm not predicting that's going to happen. I think there's a decent chance that could happen. Obviously, there's some really talented teams that stand in the way of that happening. But I do kind of look at this. This Pottsboro team from the standpoint of that 2019 team, and that came out of nowhere. For those who remember, in 2017 and 2018, both those years, the Pottsboro went 6-5, lost in the first round of the playoffs, and then boom, all of a sudden, they go 15-1, lose the championship game by 7 points. And so I wonder if this group sort of is in that mold. 2020 they went 9-3, which is good. It's not, obviously it's not 6-5, but last year's team went 6-5 and made the second round and lost, much like the 2020 team did. They both won their first games. They lost the second game, and in both cases it was to Malakoff. And I just wonder if this is, you put in the experience and the time and everything that goes with it, and then boom, here you are with this, if they win this week, they're 12-1, and then they're 13-1, and then it's been building on itself the whole time, and obviously we've seen the offense is really good with what they've been able to do. So I'm not saying it's not written in the stars. Maybe it is. I don't know, but I do think we could be looking back in a couple weeks and going, well, it's almost a carbon copy of what that 2019 team was, where they had playmakers, they had a playmaker at running back, they had a playmaker at quarterback, they had multiple receivers who could get the job done, and maybe this defense is not as stout, but they have been making plays when they need to, and I think, like I said, again, like this week with a team like Whitney, you give up some stuff late. Maybe it's backups, maybe it's whatever. And they've shown, and to be fair too, that team in 2019, they won some games that came down to the wire. They had to win. This group has done that with Winsboro. They had to win that. They won that game. They pulled that game out with the comeback. So the parallels are kind of there. And it would be interesting to see what they can do with Grandview. Again, that's a program in recent history that's one of the best in the state in 3A Division I. They're only a couple years removed from those two titles. So they have these kids. These kids were freshmen. The seniors were freshmen and eighth graders when they won those championships. That's what they grew up on. and they want to do their own legacy. So that's good. Like I said, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this 3A Division I Region 2 semifinal game at 1 p.m. on Friday at Mesquite Memorial Stadium, Pottsboro versus Grandview. Down in the 3A Division II ranks, we have two teams left there, and these two teams seem to be on a collision course since they met in district play, and we got one more game to get the rematch that everybody wants to see. And so this first matchup, this first 3A Division II Region 2 semifinal game is Gunner against Palmer, and this game is at 1 p.m. on Friday in Royce City. Gunner is 11-0. They won last week against Jacksboro 48-7, and Palmer won 49-13 against Callisburg, so they are 11-0. So this matchup. Okay, let's talk about Gunner's game last week first. So obviously last week we said, hey, what's Gunner gonna look like? They haven't played in a couple weeks. They had the forfeit in the first round. What's doing with Gunner once they get on the field? And again, Gunner looked like every week Gunner. They get up 45-0 after 3 quarters. The only points they give up come with 5 seconds left. So they were that close to having yet another shutout. They've now held out of the 10 games they've actually played. Obviously, because like I said, last week was 2 weeks ago was a forfeit. They've held 7 of those 10 games that they've played. They've held the opponent to single digits. And this, like I said, this was one pass with 5 seconds left from being another shutout. So Gunner did what they do there. And again, offensively, not super in individual numbers, but overall they rushed for 285 on 35 carries, by the way. So they didn't. It's not like they really ran it. And then you look at the passing game, 9 of 13 overall for 157 yards. So another 400 plus yards of offense, led by Ethan Sloan, who had 8 carries for 103 yards and 2 touchdowns. Ivy Hellman, 6 carries for 40 yards. Had a touchdown, fumble recovery in the end zone. He fumbled as he was going in the end zone, so it's not a rushing TD, but it's a touchdown for him no matter what. He also had 2 catches for 68 yards and a touchdown. Colin Peacock, his lone catch was a 54-yard touchdown pass from Walker Overman, who ended 5 of 8 passing for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also ran 9 times for 56 yards and a touchdown as well. And it was I'll throw in Preston Tarpley because he kicked 2 field goals of 33 and 31 yards. And it was a typical sort of Gunner game. They were back at the groove. I will say that it was 24-0 at halftime. The first couple of drives, I think you could see Gunner had to get its footing, but once it got its footing, it was there. And I think they scored on after the first 2 drives, which they punted on. I think they got points on the next 8. So that was one of those, hey, once they got up to speed, they were off and running. So that was last week, and now they've got Palmer. I was, of course, disappointed. We talked about it last week. I was kind of hoping for a little more of a local matchup with Gunner and Callisburg. But Palmer scored on the opening kickoff against Callisburg last week, and they were off to the races in that 49-13 win. And this is, like we mentioned with Paradise, having great success, one of the best seasons ever. This is the best season ever for Palmer. They have never been this far in the playoffs, the region semifinals. Obviously, they're undefeated at 11-0. If you want to play the comparison game, they played Howe to open the playoffs, like we mentioned, obviously, because they played Howe, and then we discussed that at the time. So if you want to play that game, we can certainly do that. And I don't know what to make of it, obviously, because we're talking about a Howe team that obviously was hurting at the quarterback positions, but they did still put up 19 points in that game. It's 39-19, and to look at what Gunner did against Howe, which was at full strength. So there certainly is that aspect of it. That that game was 54-21. So if you want to look at it from that regard, obviously I think a little more high power out of Gunner than Palmer. But again, you have a team that is, I think they obviously go in knowing they're the underdog. They go in knowing nobody is picking them, because obviously so many people have picked Gunner to go to the state championship, let alone be the state champion. Gunner is the 6-time defending region champion, and so they have nothing to lose in this game, and they're obviously having the best season ever, and so it's you're always interested in matchups like this, and unfortunately with Gunner, you sit here and you say you'd like it to be a close game, or you'd like to think this is, hey, this team's 11-0. How is this going to go? And the problem is that Gunner's been just so dominant in this region that when we talk about them being challenged, it's been very rare in this region for somebody to do that. And so, like I said, when even when they get to the semifinals, at times, last year they play in the state semifinals and they win 47-12, and the game isn't even that close. You look at the region final last year, they won 35-14. The year before that, they won 61-28. The year before that was 27-9. The year before that was 27-6. The year before that was 42-13. And the year before that started this run, they won 45-22. So the closest game that anybody has given them in the region finals during this run is 16 points. So that's the round after this. It's worse in the region semifinals. I mean, last year in the region semifinals, they won 62-20. 44-19. 47-14. The games have not been close. And so I don't know if Palmer's the team to give them that game. Maybe they are. But again, I don't think anybody's picking against Gunner until at least the state championship game. Maybe if we have yet another rematch of Canadian. But again, the Gunner is looking the part. They have looked the part from day one as the team to beat in this region, and until somebody beats them, I don't know if anybody is going to see that happen. And we could talk about if they do advance, they play the Bells Holiday winner in the region final. If it's Bells, obviously that's a rematch from district. That was a 10-point game, so maybe that's a game where you can see them losing. And if we do get that matchup, we will talk about that. And if they play Holiday, that's the team that they've played a lot in these region finals recently. Those scores that I named off, last year they beat Holiday in the region final. That was 35-14, and the 27-9, and the 27-6, and the what was that other one? There was another one in there, I thought. But they've played Holiday so many times that and they've beaten them, and those games haven't been close, that you kind of go, well, why would I believe that Holiday can do it again? Now, if we get Gunner Bells, which we all hope we get Gunner Bells, because that game was 24-14, and that would be amazing for, like I said, that would be the first one we could get. We could have Gunner Bells next week, and then the next week Whitesboro Pottsboro. The dream the Texoma football dream is to have that happen the next 2 weeks. I have a really good feeling Gunner's going to get there. There's no reason for me to believe that they're not, just based on everything that they're doing. So I don't care that this is one of the 5 undefeated matchups left in the state in this round. 11-0 versus 11-0 or whatever. I'm not concerned with that. I just think that and until they get beat before the state semifinals or the championship game, it's very hard to sit here and say they don't have the upper hand, that they should not be viewed as the favorite until they lose, because that's just the way that it's been during this run, and they haven't proven otherwise. So Palmer's going to give it a shot. They've obviously had a really good season. They obviously have they've had some success on both sides of the ball. If you want to talk about just obviously they won their district. They had won the district. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but then they lost in the first round. That was part of that. If you remember, I think it was 2 years ago. Our district 8-3A that has all the local teams that had SNS and when SNS was in it, and SNS and Leonard and the Bells and Gunner made the playoffs. I think it was those 4, and they swept the district that has Palmer and Blooming Grove and all those guys in it. It's hard to tell. I mean, obviously they've been better. They're putting up some points, and their defense has been pretty good. The last 3 games or the last month. Actually, you probably stretch it back. I mean, honestly, they're not giving up a whole lot of points. I think the most points they've given up, it looks like, is 23. Last week obviously gave up 13 points to Calsburg, 19 to Howe. Then they had 2 shutouts before that to end district play. They gave up 20 points the week before that, and then 7, 14, 12, 0. I mean, so they've got it going on both sides of the ball better than they ever have. And so I'm sure they're going to go, why not us? Why can't we be the team that takes down Big Bad Gunner? And we'll see if they can. I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but we will see when Gunner and Palmer take to the field at Royce City at 1 p.m. on Friday. And so on the other side of this bracket in 3A Division II Region 2, like we mentioned, is Bell's Holiday. And this is a rematch from last year. And Bells comes in here at 10-2 after they won 50-25 against Comanche, and Holiday won 31-10 against Scurry Rosser. They are 12-0, and we did mention last week, if you go by the rankings, however you want to do that, the end of the regular season rankings, Gunner was number 1 in the state in 3A Division 2. In this region, they obviously would be number 1. Holiday was number 2, and Bells was number 5. So you have 3 of the 4 teams left in this region that are considered to be 3 of the 5 best teams in all of Division 2. And so obviously somebody is going to lose in this matchup here, and that's a shame, but that's the way, if you look at rankings and brackets, that is how they work. And so this is a rematch of last year, 21-14 in overtime. Holiday advances to face Gunner again in the region final. Holiday has won all 3 matchups that have all come recently. They were the non-district opponent for Bells last year and the year before that as part of the last realignment cycle. The non-district game last year was semi-close, and obviously you cannot get closer than 21-14 in overtime. Bells is trying to get to the region final for the first time ever. So that was the same scenario as last year. If we win, we're in the region final. They were looking at same thing last year. Hey, Gunner Bells, here we are. We could play again. This would be awesome. And unfortunately, Bells could not get that win. But for whatever reason, I feel like this is a different matchup. I don't know if Holiday is as good as they have been. I'm not saying they're not good, because obviously they've shown if there's a number 2 to Gunner in this region, over the last 4 or 5 years, it has been Holiday because that's been the matchup in the region final. But I don't know if it's, maybe I think Bells is obviously is playing as well as they have ever played. We talk about, we have this sort of round robin of Pottsboro's only loss is to Whitesboro, and they're still playing. Bells' only losses are to Whitesboro and Gunner, and they're still playing. So, and both of those games were, winnable in the fourth quarter. So we could be talking about a Bells team that could be 12-0. And again, they did and we talk about the one thing about the teams that are left, and we'll say this about Collinsville when we talk about them next, especially offensively, these teams do what they do. They do it so well, and they do it every week, and it's like clockwork. So when you watch Whitesboro, it's the same kids in the same scheme in their scheme doing it like every week. And Pottsboro's been doing it that way with their wins. Collinsville's been doing it that way with their wins. And, of course, Bells we talk about all the time because it's slot T, and that's what they do. It's the same three guys behind a stellar offensive line, pushing people around, getting the job done. They roll up another 438 yards this last game against Comanche. Brock Baker leads the way, 16 carries, 164 yards, 4 touchdowns. Grady Waldrop, 18 carries, 141 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Spencer Hines, 11 carries for 102 yards. And you look at the score by quarter, it's 14-0 after the first quarter. They get up 21-0. It's 35-12 at halftime. And again, much like the Pottsboro game, looking a little closer. Not that 50-25 is close, but that game was 50-12 before Comanche scored twice in the fourth quarter. And again, that 50 points came in literally 3 quarters and the first play of the fourth quarter before Bells stopped scoring. So I want, we talked about this matchup last week. What was it going to look like? You had a 10-1 Comanche team doing some great things. What were they? Or I guess a 9-1 Comanche team. No, 10-1. Yeah, 10-1 Comanche team. What were they going to look like in this matchup? Because they were inexperienced. It was all new for them. But obviously they're putting up big numbers and probably feeling that they can be the team to knock off Bells. And Bells just kind of came out and said, "Nope, thanks, we're good. We're going back to the region. We're going back to the region semifinals for the third time in 4 years." And of course, the biggest thing we've talked about with Bells is, can they break through to the region final? Can they do it? They've never done it. They're trying again this year. It's the same team in their way. Can they get the job done? Holiday is known for their defense. Obviously, you beat somebody in overtime, 21-14. You're playing some good defense, and that's been the trademark. The big thing with Holiday, especially when they've played Gunner, is can they produce enough offense? And so they've had some fits and starts in terms of that offense, but the defense has been there. You look at the score, you look at their weekly scores, and then you're talking about giving up 7, 14, 14, 0, 14, 0, 0, 7, 12, and then 10. So they haven't given up more than 2 touchdowns since the second week of the season when they won 41-19 against Jim Ned. Nobody else has scored more than 2 touchdowns against them. So that's where we're at. So if you're Bells, you got to get, if you get in the 20s, you probably have a chance. And I think like I said, I think this could be the year that they finally break through. And so I hope they do, because I think everybody would love to see Gunner Bells on the big stage, with as close as the rematch, as close as the first game was, to have them be playing for a spot in the semifinals would just be so delicious that I hope it happens, because that would just be super fun to have happen, and it would be great for a program that, like we said, with Bells is on this run, this last decade plus. They're having the best stretch in school history, and you just want to see. They've kind of built up to it. They had trouble getting past the first round. Now they've been getting to the third round, but the fourth round has just been that brick wall that they cannot bust through. And Holiday's been obviously a big reason why. So let's hope they can do that. At 2:00 on Friday at C.H. Collins Athletic Complex. And again, I don't know if you're superstitious. I don't know if you believe in karma or stuff like that. But this is the exact same setup as last year. Same day, same afternoon, same location. So obviously, Coach West and the Panthers aren't superstitious, because there are some coaches that say, well, no, I'm not playing there on the same day, on the same time, because you beat me there last year, so we're gonna go someplace else so you're not comfortable, or you bring back good feelings for you and bad feelings for our kids. They're in the same spot, and I think that's a good indicator of their mindset. That's not going to be an issue. We're not worried about stuff like that. There are some coaches that do worry about that sort of thing and bounce around and say, okay, well, let's play somewhere else this time, or whatever. But I think that says a lot. They're going back to the scene of the crime, and they want to make sure that they take care of business this time, and advance to the region final for the first time. And speaking of teams doing things for either the first time or a long time, down in Class 2A Division II Region 2 semifinals, we have the Collinsville Pirates taking on Windthorst, 1 p.m. on Friday in Springtown. Collinsville is 11-1. They won last week 51-14 against McCamey. Windthorst won 43-29 against Sterling City, and they are 8-4. And so obviously they have by far, when you look at all these teams that are opponents for our local teams, they have by far the worst record. But again, you're in the final 16. You can't go by that. This is a team with plenty of experience. This is the fourth straight year that Windthorst is in the third round. So all these seniors know is, hey, we at least are playing past Thanksgiving. That's been a given the whole time we've been in high school. And on the other side, we talked about how is Collinsville going to handle making a playoff run, because this is a group that didn't make the playoffs last year, went 4-6, played a bunch of young guys, is still playing a bunch of young guys. The sophomores became juniors. There's not a lot of seniors, and so how are they going to handle it? So far, they've handled it well. We talked about sort of the same thing with this Collinsville McCamey game. You had a team with a good record. You had a long bus ride. How are you going to handle it? And Collinsville comes out and puts up 50. And again, slow start for I think both teams. It's 12-7 Collinsville after the first quarter. I think a lot of that has to do, like I said, long bus ride, playing at a different time. The game being played a little earlier. So you just kind of have to get used to it. And then big second quarter, you're up 32-14, and then you pull away in the second half. You shut out McCamey in the second half. You blow the game open. And again, it's the same names. They're doing the same stuff, and they're doing it in big ways. Another over 550 yards of offense. Most of that coming in the air, as Logan Jenkins goes 18 of 28 for 356 yards, 7 touchdown passes. He also ran 7 times for 51 yards and a score. Rylan Newman had 20 carries for 135 yards. He did not score on the ground, but he did have a touchdown catch, much like most of the guys we're going to talk about here at the receiver spots. Nathan Bocanegra had 6 catches for 123 yards and a touchdown. Carter Scott had 4 catches for 101 yards and a touchdown. Colin Barnes, 2 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown. Landon Carpenter's only catch was a 38-yard touchdown, and Reed Patterson had 2 catches for only 7 yards, but they were both touchdowns, and that's how you get to 51 if you are Collinsville. And again, so you have a Collinsville team that has tied the school record for wins that was last done in 2000, and we talked about this is by getting to the region semifinals. They hadn't done that since 2013. They're trying to get to the region final for the first time since 2009. And again, it's just a question of, from my opinion, of can Collinsville handle the pressure of the week? Their only losses to Cooper, who is still playing, and you look at a team that is experiencing all this stuff for the first time, whereas you have a Windthorst team that has had success. They've done this. They've been there, done that with getting to playing past Thanksgiving. Collinsville is doing all this stuff and it's new. It was, hey, let's make the playoffs. Hey, let's win this district. Hey, let's play past let's just win a playoff game and then build on that. Hey, let's play past Thanksgiving. Now you're here, and again, you look at it and you say it's 11-1 versus 8-4. Most people are probably picking Collinsville. Can you handle that pressure? Can you handle going up against a team that is able to treat this like any other game, because this is the third time some of these kids are playing in this game, or maybe even the fourth time, being at the 2A level, how many of these kids were contributors to that first third round team, 4 years ago. So I look at just overall these 5 teams as a whole, and they've been so good, and I think you can say here, I could see all 5 of these teams win. And I could see a couple of them lose, just based on the matchups. I mean, that's at the point where we are in this bracket, people. I mean, everybody is good. The very cliche, which I love. I think it's a great, and it's a cliche because it fits. There are no turkeys after Thanksgiving. You can play somebody in the first round that's not very good, especially if you're a district champion. You play a 4 seed and they have a losing record. They're not very good. You can do that in the second round because your little pod might have 2 bad teams, 2 teams with bad records. Somebody's got to advance. It's the luck of the draw. They happen to play each other, and you get to play them in the second round. But you get to the third round. You're one of the top 16 teams left. You're trying to be one of the top 8 teams left in the bracket. All these teams, like we said, you just look at all these records. We're talking 10-1, 10-2, 11-1, 10-2, 11-0, 11-0, 10-2, 12-0, 11-1, 8-4. We got 10 teams, and the record for 9 of them are pretty stinking good. And so there are no turkeys after Thanksgiving. You can't assume just because somebody's got 4 losses or 5 losses or however many losses are left, everybody's good. And if you look at the playoff pairings, that's what you're gonna find. Okay, you're gonna find teams that have undefeated records or have 1 loss, whether it's from 6A down to 6-man. Everybody's good, and so we can sit there and say, well, I think it looks like I think Gunner's gonna win, or Gunner should win, or however you want to look at it. I'm sure holiday people look at Bells and say, well, we should win, just because we beat them last year and we're undefeated and they have 2 losses. At this point, from this point on, it's really hard to look at things as an upset or how did that team get that far. I'm sure there's a team or 2 in the bracket. I haven't looked at the ones that don't affect our teams. I'm sure I could find 2 or 3 teams that, how did they get this far? Oh, hey, this, I know everybody complains about the 4 teams making the playoffs. Fourth place teams make runs, and it happens. There's at least 1 or 2 every year. They get this far, or even the region final, and you're like, how did that team get this far? So it's not unprecedented, but everybody's good. So could I see our teams from Texoma go 5-0 this week? Absolutely. Could I see 3? I'm not going to say 0-5 because I think our teams are too good to have that happen. Especially just based on the history of the opponents and how good they've shown to be. But if you told me anything else, our teams go 3-2, 4-1, maybe even 2-3. I could see it because you're playing the best of the best. From this point until the week before Christmas, everybody's going to be really good. Everybody's going to have a really good record. The question is, what injuries happen between now and then? What's the weather going to be like? We are blessed, it seems, that we may have some good weather coming up on Friday afternoon. But the question the next couple weeks is going to be, are you playing in a part of the state that might be a lot colder than the other? Are you going to be in a part of the state that's supposed to get rain? And that changes game plans and outcomes and whatever. But everybody's good, and that's what makes it fun. And it's really fun that we still have this many teams still going. And hopefully we'll get some outcomes that we want to see for the next couple weeks for sure, based off of what happens on Friday afternoon. I am kind of upset that there's not a night game because I always like to do the double, cover a game at 1:00 and then cover a game at 7. But unfortunately, all 5 of the teams are playing either at 1 or 2 o'clock. So gonna have to pick one and go to just one game on this Friday. But again, it's gonna be fun. It always is. Again, I want to thank you for listening to the podcast. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Have a fun Thursday. Be safe going out on Friday to these games. I know they're in the afternoon, and a lot of them are a lot closer this week, which I know everyone's excited about. That there's not as much travel, but still, there's going to be a lot of people on the road, a lot of people traveling. But enjoy the day, and enjoy the football. It's really great to be able to have these teams doing what they're doing. Now that we're near the end of November, it's crazy to think that we've got December football around the corner. It's just amazing how fast this season goes. But again, you can follow the action. Go to HeraldDemocrat.com. Follow me on Twitter as long as Twitter keeps existing. At Jason De La Rosa is the Twitter handle. And if that somehow goes down, the All-Texomaland Facebook page, we post all the stories. We put all those stories on the page there. And also subscribe. It's not that much money. It's worth it. I think it's worth it. If you like what we do here, whether it's on the podcast or in the paper or the stuff that we put online, take a moment and subscribe. Give a gift of the Herald Democrat this holiday season to a loved one and say, I want you to read all about what our teams are doing for the next 6 months or the next year and help us out a little bit. Because I like doing what I'm doing and I want to keep doing it. And you guys subscribing and clicking on the stuff on the website, commenting, doing all the stuff we do on the social media, it really helps out a lot. So again, happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the football. We'll be talking about the region final / state quarterfinals next week here on the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast.